I could tell you all kinds of wonderful things about John Nichols, but I'll bet you all are just anxious to hear him.
Yes.
Okay? So, without further ado, John Nichols.
Brothers and sisters, that was the single best introduction I've ever done. It was right as it should be done. You know what happens when you get a little bit longer in the tooth? When you've been doing it for a while? You know, your Wikipedia entry gets a little longer. And then you go to events and people, honorable, decent, good people, print the whole damn thing out. And then they start reading through it all. And it's long. And you realize, you know, you're not as exciting as you thought. So I much prefer off script, and what a wonderful moment of leadership there, not only to go off script, but to throw it on the floor. To let that man do something. It is such an honor to be back here in Green Valley, first time ever in Quail Creek, right? Which is, but my mother, who is with me, my mother is here because I always want to have at least one Wisconsinites. I know here we actually have like dozens of them, but my mother is with me, and what we do is we just look at the scenery. And I have to say, this is pretty lovely. I mean, coming down the mountains, the whole bit, fantastic. You are living in a very wonderful place. Yes. You're living in a great state. You're living in a state, yeah, it's got its problems. At a political event, there is an inclination to say maybe it isn't all great. And I know that Representative Hernandez is well aware that it isn't all great. He has to go up. He may speak out on us tonight because he's a weaker, softer man than some of us. Doesn't have that all-nighter kind of character because he's got to leave tomorrow morning. Or he's got to leave tonight, right? He's got to get to Phoenix to govern. And because he's got to be in there at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. We've got to respect him for that. We also got to respect the fact that you have an openly gay Latino state representative coming out of Green Valley and getting up there and making things happen in the state legislature. That speaks to him and that speaks to you. And that is real politics and doing real things and making it happen. And the thing is, he has now got one of his sisters elected to the legislature as well, and the other to the school board. And I've come to you tonight to say that I'm very disappointed in his parents. Because they did not produce a sufficient number of Hernandez's to take every elected position in the state back to the Democrats. Well, my hope is, though, that they figured out how to, because what's happening now in some of this genetic science stuff, we could still reproduce in all sorts of ways. But what I do want to say to you, is, I'm in Arizona for the book festival this weekend. It was an incredible event. Too crowded to even do stuff. It's wonderful. If you weren't up there, you should go. It's just great. I'm in Arizona also because I want to tell you that this has been, for some of you, a long time in the wilderness. Hadn't been as easy as you would like. You haven't gotten to the mountaintop quite as quickly as you might hope. But what I want to tell you is that we are in a transformational moment in our politics in this country, and we have had some horrible, depressing things happen, but in most of history, horrible, depressing things like, I don't know, Mike Pence, happen, right? Bad things happen to good people, but at the moment that we are in, is one that there's an incredible churn. There is a lot happening, and change is more possible now in states like Arizona than it has been for a very, very long time. And if you don't agree with me, now I know people differ politically. You have primaries and you have fights for nominations. I understand all that. But you understand, you sent a bisexual woman to the United States Senate to then go up with a copy of the Constitution to Mike Pence and say, hey, I happen to understand that you are uncomfortable with bisexuals and women and an actual honest reading of the Constitution. But at this moment, you have to swear me in to the United States Senate for the state of Arizona. Come on, do not be whining at me anymore, because that was one of the best tricks anybody in America did last year. And I loved it. Boy, I saw that one. Did you see that, by the way? When she was there, she didn't walk up. She ran up there. She said, I'm ready. Let's do this, eh? And poor Pence, you know. I gotta tell you something. I am desperate for Mike Pence to be president of the United States. I want that. You know, all these people, I can't believe it. I go around this country, I think, oh, this is ridiculous. People say to me, oh, you can't impeach Trump because you might get Pence. Are you kidding me? Mike Pence can't tie his own shoes. This guy is pathetic. He is an awful, ridiculous, terrible. There are Republicans who say, you know, look, you can have dinner with Mike Pence and get your photograph taken with him, or you can give us an extra $10,000 and you don't have to have dinner with Mike Pence and get your picture taken, and they'll give the extra $10,000. And I don't say this casually. I'm not joking with you. It's like anybody who says to you, "Oh man, we can't let Pence become president because Pence is like a militant evangelical Christian, you know." And by the way, I am a Christian. I don't have any problem with Christianity at all. I think it's a wonderful thing. I just like to have people. I kind of tired of people doing bad things in the name of my Lord. But you know, you got all these fears of Mike Pence getting into power. And as best I can understand it is that he might do bad stuff. And I'm thinking, have you been paying attention for the last 2 years? I mean, really? You think you might get somebody who does bad stuff? And then it strikes me that if I could have an incompetent, unappealing person who has no ability to rally a crowd doing bad stuff versus the guy who, as bad as he is, he can still kind of rally a crowd, I'll take it. And so the bottom line is, thank you, Arizonans, for torturing Mike Pence. And thank you. And let me just say that I'm hoping that in short order we can torture him more. Not in any literal sense. I was literally I was on a panel today up at the Book Fest with Ed Asner, and I asked him a question about Trump. And he went off the rails. I mean, he was just saying horrible stuff about Trump. And I had to say, I finally said, well, you mean figuratively? And he said, no, literally. And I'm like, the hatred of this Trump guy, what's going on with that, eh? It's really getting edgy there. And you know what? It's almost as if, check me on this. It's almost as if he's a racist, right? A con man and a cheat. Now, where have I heard that this week? All right. By the way, this has been a hell of a week. You know, even before I got to Arizona. And I'm going to, by the way, come back and talk a little about your state, because I'm really hopeful about what's going on here. But let me just take a moment on this week, if I might. So, I'm in Wisconsin, and I live in Wisconsin. I'm in Washington a lot, New York a bit, but I live in Wisconsin. And this week, the good Lord, watching over us carefully, made it 15 below zero. No, literally, today, I believe it is 15 below zero. And so what that said to us is, you have to stay home and watch every minute of Michael Cohen's testimony. I might have gone out otherwise, but no, I don't live in Arizona. I can't golf, I can't, I gotta stay home and watch Michael Cohen. And to me, I think, and I'm joking around a little bit, but I'm very serious about this. I think Michael Cohen was a pivot point in not just the Trump administration, but really in our politics at a fundamental level. Because, yes, it is true. Michael Cohen, I think we can fairly say, is a horrible person, right? I mean, come on, 10 years working for the Trump organization. You know, he really did stuff. Even Michael Cohen agrees that he is a horrible person. He testified to that before the Congress of the United States this week. But in the acknowledgement of his horrible personhood, and in the acknowledgement of the bad stuff he had done, he was in an odd kind of way cleansed. It is a sort of confession moment. And he gets up there and he lays it out on Trump. I really recommend this. If you didn't watch him, if you just watch him, that's good. Read his statement. It is a legal brief. If there are lawyers in the room, Michael Cohen's statement, he says he is a racist. And then he goes through piece after piece after piece confirming this. He says he is a con man. He goes through piece after piece after piece confirming this. He is a cheat. Goes through piece after piece. If you read the statement, it's actually a very, very powerful statement. It was delivered, I think, with great sincerity. And then, incredibly enough, and this is why I know it's been hard being a Democrat in Arizona sometimes, but this is why it's better than being the other thing. Because the Republicans on the committee were forced to listen to this whole thing, right? They had to listen to the whole thing. And then they had their talking points, right? Well, you're a liar, right? And he said, yes, I am. And he said, and then they'd be like, well, you want to get a book contract. And there were literally members of Congress who have book contracts accusing him of wanting to get a book contract. Having worked for a guy, Donald Trump, who wrote books like The Art of the Deal. Like, you know, it's like, Glenn, you are the worst sinner ever. You want a book contract. And he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe after I'm out of prison. And so they're throwing everything they've got at him, right? You know, we think you might be here because you really don't want to spend all that time in prison. And he's like, yeah, you know, to be honest, I prefer not to go. You know, I mean, it's not that great a thing. But you understand, the one thing that none of those Republicans did was say, no, here is the evidence that Donald Trump isn't what you say he is. And that is why Michael Cohen was such an effective person. There was only one attempt to discredit what he said about Donald Trump. And that was in one of the great triumphs of, you know, human experimentation. Mark Meadows, the congressman from down in some place in the South, he brings up an African-American woman. And he doesn't say, right, I just want to point out that this is the 21st century. He doesn't say, I'm sorry, I respect struggle African-American woman, I'm giving her the microphone. And let her say it. No. He just puts her there standing behind him. Which is what had to be one of the most uncomfortable moments for anybody ever, right? You got to stand there, and he says, this woman, right? Her family comes from like Alabama or someplace, right? And literally, like, okay, cool. Could have been Mississippi. And he goes, she comes from the South, and she works for Donald Trump, and she wouldn't work for a racist. And you're like, first off, you'd be surprised how many people have ended up working for racists, right? Who are, in fact, people of color. You'd be surprised how many women have ended up working for sexists. You'd be surprised how many LGBTQ people have ended up working for homophobes. You'd be surprised how many immigrants have ended up working for xenophobic maniacs. right? I mean, you would be surprised, right? But no, this guy pushes it. He pushes it. And then Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Detroit, and you really don't want to mess with the congresswoman from Detroit. Rashida Tlaib, not the only one. Oh, Congresswoman Lawrence does as well. So, you know, I'm kind of a little bit offended by this, right? You know, this idea of bringing up this woman and saying, well, because she says that it's all okay. You can't call down Trump a racist. Well, the fact is, immediately, even before we got to Tlaib, it's important to note that I kind of thought that Michael Cohen had a pretty good response. Because I don't know if you remember, because he said, you know, how could she work for Donald Trump if he's a racist? And he said, yeah, it's kind of like the same way I could as to send Holocaust survivors, right? Because Donald Trump hasn't been all that great on a whole host of these issues as well. And so the fact of the matter is, Cohen came back well, but then these members of Congress start coming in, and Rashida Tlaib says, you know, I'm kind of offended by this. I think this is kind of racist. And then Mark Meadows, right? Mark Meadows goes, ho, 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 ho. Stop this session right now. We gotta halt this whole thing because I've been offended, right? Now, amazingly enough, Mark Meadows didn't remember all those times when he was running around saying that Barack Obama should be sent back to Kenya, right? Literally, they have tapes of him saying it, right? So, right out the bat, he's like offended that he might be called something other than the Southern gentleman that he is. And so he's going on and on about this, right? And they are demanding apologies and stuff like that. The only reason I point this out, aside from the fact that it's kind of fun to pick on Mark Meadows, is because that was the dramatic moment of the hearing, right? It's one of the dramatic moments of the hearing. Where was the dramatic moment where somebody said, as a Republican member of Congress, here is the uncontrovertible proof that Donald Trump is an honorable man who doesn't con people, who doesn't cheat, and who doesn't practice racism, xenophobia, sexism, and all of the other sins that he has been accused of. Not one of those Republicans stood up and did that. And brothers and sisters, if you don't think the average American didn't notice that, then you're not paying attention. This country is starting to wake up to the reality that Michael Cohen, for all of his sins, is a dramatically more honorable man than the President of the United States. That brings us to an interesting point, my Green Valley Democrats. What's going to happen? Because that's my job. My job is to come here every year and tell you exactly what is going to happen. So you can just turn off Rachel Maddow, go out and you just look at the stars and look at the wonderful, you know, you live in a beautiful place. I'm going to just settle this whole thing. And so this is what, I'm going to let you know what is going to happen in the next year and in the next 2 years. And so here you go. Ready? It's pretty much one sentence, pretty easy to do. All hell is going to break loose. I'm not kidding you. This is going to be an insane. You think, this is the thing. People think, oh man, this last couple of years has been pretty crazy. I feel like I've been on a roller coaster, right? I'm feeling a little nauseous. And then now, it's like when you go and you go to the big park and you get off the roller coaster and say, man, I'm still dizzy. And then your friend says, well, let's go on that one. And you are about to get on that one. Because the next 6 months are going to be crazy, insane, wild, dangerous, thrilling, horrifying, the whole bit. This is the best theme park ride you have ever gotten on. But it is also a ride that at some point you may regret having gotten on. And I really say that very, I've thought about this a little bit. Here's the reality of what's going to happen, I don't know, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, Jerry Nadler, the very competent, serious chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, will dispatch 60 subpoenas to key members of the Trump Organization, the Trump family, and the different agencies with which the president has been conspiring to subvert the Constitution. Jerry Nadler. By the way, the state rep has to leave because he's got to get back up to govern on your behalf. Give him a round of applause. He's a smaller man than Jerry Nadler. And Jerry Nadler, who's very serious, very thoughtful fellow, this is real stuff. 60 subpoenas. Donald Trump Jr. is one of them. I mean, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization is one of them, right? People at the Justice Department who have failed to go and take this stuff seriously are being subpoenaed. The fact is, Jerry Nadler will tomorrow morning begin a deconstruction of the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, and Trump himself. This is where it's going to get interesting, right? Our Republican friends will once again say Jerry Nadler's a bad man. But where will the defense of Trump be? Where will it be? And this is where it will be hard. Because the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump achieved power in this country by being starkly unexamined. The weird thing about it is, we paid attention to his obnoxiousness. We paid attention to his sexism, his racism, his xenophobia, all these things which are very, very troubling. But he always kept about him this argument that, yeah, maybe I'm an obnoxious guy, but I'm a billionaire. I'm good at this thing. What will begin to happen tomorrow, what already began with Michael Cohen last week, is the reality that he has never been a billionaire, that he has never been a successful businessman, that this has been a con job from the start, that he has failed again and again and again, and that he in fact runs a tiny operation. The Trump operation operates on one floor in that Trump Tower. In literally, if you hear people like Donnie Deutsch describe it, people that have been there, it's a tiny little office with a handful of family members hanging on. It looks, it looks like a sort of like a mid-level like shipping company or something like that. This is not the great empire that he has said. And what will begin to happen is that the people who trusted him, who we should not beat up on, we should recognize they fell for a con job. And with all due respect, you've had relatives that have done. Somebody's gotten an email that they answered, or somebody's, some aunts answered a call, or somebody. We've all been conned in some way. We have a bunch of people that fell for a con job. Some of them will continue. Some of them will continue to fall for that because they choose to. Yeah, there may be some racists. There may be some xenophobes. There may be some folks. We understand there'll be some folks. That's not the whole of them. And the fact is that in relatively short order, this thing is going to start to really crumble. This presidency is going to start to unravel. And it will unravel because we are finally getting to the heart of the matter. Not looking at all of the bells and whistles, but looking at the reality. Lousy businessman, not good at what he does, and he survived by taking loans from bad people who wanted to influence what he did by giving him money. And that is why he will not release his tax returns, and that is why, as Congressman Neal from Massachusetts announced yesterday, that on the House Ways and Means Committee, they are beginning to develop the demand and the paperwork to require him to give his tax returns to the House Ways and Means Committee. And Congressman Elijah Cummings, Congressman Elijah Cummings had so much fun on Thursday that he's announced that he's going to have a whole bunch of additional hearings as well. And here we begin to see the intersection of all of these different committees and all of these different investigations. And then our friend Chris Christie. Who doesn't love Chris Christie, right? I know I love Chris Christie because he put Jared Kushner's dad in jail. So Chris Christie says, you don't have to worry about Robert Mueller. Trump's problem is the Southern District of New York, where they are investigating fraud and illegal business practices and all of the high crimes and misdemeanors done by the Trump organization. And you know who was cooperating with them? I found this, I'm learning things every day. The chief financial officer of the Trump organization is a cooperating witness with the Southern District of New York. I'm loving this woman right here, because every time I say this, she goes, oh. And you don't stop, please don't. But this is, what I'm saying is, I know it's been a long couple years. I realize that. But you've been waiting, and you know, Christmas doesn't come right away. You have to get the presents and put the tree up and, you know, decorate, put the lights out, do all the stuff. If you're Jewish, you have to, you know, decorate the Hanukkah bush and, you know, do all the different things to get ready for the holidays. And, you know, it's almost there now. We're into December. And this is where it's going to get complicated for Democrats. All sounds fun up to this point, right? You know, what can go wrong? I got a lot of time, I'm going to watch some hearings, right? Well, this is where it gets complicated for Democrats, because what Democrats have to do is keep their wits about them in a period that is going to be chaotic, and that is going to cause people an immense amount of discomfort and pain and uncertainty about the fate of their republic. And they will come to you, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, and they may not even always agree with you. Your job is to be sane and reasonable and help walk them through this. Because if you want to start winning elections, what you have to do is understand that you need to bring people out of the darkness and into the light, right? You've got to work with them through this very chaotic moment, and it is going to be possible. Now, the first thing that you have to do, and this is important, is recognize the core reality that elections matter. Because nothing, essentially, aside from the Southern District of New York, nothing that I just talked about would be happening if it wasn't for the 2018 election.
Right.
If Paul Ryan, or this McCarthy guy, was in charge of the House of Representatives, you know what they'd be doing next week? Investigating Hillary Clinton. Right? I mean, they'd have another inquiry into something with Hillary Clinton. And so what you need to understand is elections matter a great deal. And you should never take your eye off that prize. In Arizona, you took a Republican House seat from this region, not far, around here, and you sent a woman, Democrat, to Congress. That matters. That was real, and that feeds into the whole of this. And I know it was a crowded primary. I actually know that there's people in this room that did not back the woman that got to that seat. I understand that. I'm not telling you who's right and who's wrong here. What I am telling you is that at the end of the day, getting control of chambers of government matters in a fundamental way. And you cannot look at what's happening with these hearings, you cannot look at these inquiries, you cannot look at all the things that are going on and say, oh, well, yeah, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this person. No, you have to recognize power, this competition for power is very real, and it will decide what is possible and what is not possible. So first and foremost, elections matter. Everything that's happening plays out of that. Second, and this is a big one, it's a more complicated one. The American people, and I'm counting you out of this, I'm bringing you into the pundit class here, right? You are the activists, you are the engaged folks. I know that you follow this day in and day out. So I don't expect you to be, kind of on the margins and uncertain about things. I think you know what's going on. You spend 6 to 8 hours a day watching MSNBC. And maybe that's a little much, right? Take an hour off. But I was on it this morning, and thank you very much for watching. But, so, but I count you into that community that's aware of this thing. But there's a lot of Americans who are going to have to deal with some complicated issues. They're going to have to deal with their president of the United States being an incredibly bad player. Now, I know that you guys already thought he was a bad player, right? So that's not a revelation, that's not a shock to you. But there are folks who actually are going to wrestle with this, and they're not all right-wing nuts. There are folks who are relatively mainstream, and you need to work with them, and you need to work with the whole of society, including some Democrats on this thing. And one of the things you need to work on is the I word, impeachment. Because it's going to arise this year. It's going to be real, and you have to know how to talk about it. And this is the thing. I wrote a history of impeachment. Impeachment is a whole instrument of the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States mentions voting 5 times, it mentions impeachment 6 times. The founders of the American experiment intended that if somebody achieved the presidency of the United States, that they could be held to account. They had just fought a war against a really bad king, and they wanted always to have the ability to check and balance the person in power, not waiting till the next election, because as they said, they did not want to have an elected despot. They didn't want to have a king for 4 years. And so if it became clear at a point during the term of a presidency that that presidency was damaging, threatening, bad for the country, that you had to intervene at that point and not wait. And this is something that gets kind of the heart of the American experiment, that people actually think about kind of like as they go deeper into pondering their country. And that is, we will assume that our Republican friends, most of them, will be against impeachment because they don't want to lose power. Democrats have to be careful not to be against impeachment because they want to get power. And you understand that, right? That there are some Democrats who say, well, why don't we wait until 2020? Why rush this thing, right? Let's just let Trump take himself down. Let's just let him do horrible things. And if that becomes the Democratic Party's message, right, that the Democratic Party takes the Constitution no more seriously than the Republican Party, it's just, the Republicans want to keep Trump there because they want to keep power. Democrats want to keep Trump there because they want to beat him in 2020. That's not a healthy message for Democrats to have. I am not standing before you right now telling you, run out and impeach the president. Well, actually, I kind of am, but that's not where I want you to go to and just jump there casually. But I do want you to understand that if indeed the hearings that Elijah Cummings and Congressman Neal and Jerry Nadler hold over the next few months, and if the revelations from the Mueller report, if the revelations as regards the Southern District of New York point to the necessity that this man should be removed from office, do not run from that and say, oh, no, we're so into politics that we don't want to do what's right for the country because it might interrupt our election plans. That is not going to be rewarded in the 21st century. It's not going to be something that people are happy with. I promise you, those young voters that you want to get excited, all those disenfranchised folks that you want to bring into the process are not going to say, thank you for saddling us with Donald Trump for another 20 months because you had an election plan. And so this is complicated. This is threading the needle, right? It isn't rushing to impeachment. It's not saying, oh yeah, I got to take this guy down right away. It is saying, if it gets to that point, have an idea, be able to talk about this, be rational about this, be the rational center of American politics. Be the folks who say the Constitution matters sufficiently that we must act to do right by the country. And then I know, people will say, oh no, then Mike Pence would become president. But I think we've already established that Mike Pence as president is a dream come true. For 2 reasons, and then we're going to go on to some local politics quickly and a couple of things before we take some questions for you. Two reasons why Mike Pence as President of the United States is a dream come true. Number one, he is, I think it's fair to say, as implicated in most of the high crimes and misdemeanors of this administration as the president. Remember, Mike Pence is the guy who vetted General Flynn, right? Mike Pence is the guy who vetted, like, most of these people, and suddenly his memory is really bad. But, you know, if you start to look at it, I'm not sure how clean Mike Pence is. However, let's say he became President of the United States of America. I'm going to tell you this. Running against Mike Pence in 2020, I find that, frankly, you know, not giving you advice here, but boy, if you can pick your opponent, this is a uniquely unappealing human being. I mean, he became Donald Trump's vice president because he didn't think he could get reelected in Indiana. And so, which is about a pretty red state, right? So the fact of the matter is, Mike Pence is not a terribly big threat. But this is the really good part. If you were to displace Donald Trump, let's imagine, not saying we're going to get there, I don't know that we are, that's not my point, but let's imagine that, I know I love you, yeah. But if we were to replace Donald Trump as president and make Mike Pence president for a few months or whatever the end of this journey is, who would turn against Mike Pence first? Who would torture Mike Pence more than I ever will? Donald Trump, of course! He could not stand having someone else be in the Oval Office. I guarantee you, Donald Trump, before anything else happened, would be tweeting about Mike Pence. And he would literally shred and destroy him. Democrats would be literally shedding tears for Mike Pence. And so, with all due respect, for both cynical and sincere reasons, as we get on this roller coaster, as we go through it, be conscious of these realities. It is going to get crazy. It is going to be difficult. Things are going to be revealed about the president that are really going to cause people to believe that we must act now because it is urgent that he not continue as president. Where that goes, whatever happens, everything with the Republican Senate, all of this understood. But be thinking about it in rational ways and not just political ways. Be thinking about it as regards the fate of the Republic and how you can talk about it in ways that might inspire people and engage them, rather than just make yourself look like another bunch of politicians. Okay. Now, that brings us to who will replace Donald Trump. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but everyone except you people is running for president of the United States. In fact, it was notable that as I sat at my table this evening, there were two people considering entering the race. And you do understand that if you carry Green Valley amongst this large number of candidates, you would be a viable contender. We are literally looking at the possibility of 20 Democrats running for president of the United States of America. What's that?
16 Republicans.
16 Republicans. Look how that turned out. One of them won. Well, actually, one of them got an opportunity to lose to Hillary Clinton by 3 million votes. Except for Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So you have 16 to 20 people running for president. The Democratic Party is already talking about having like a lottery for who gets in each debate, because it's like you couldn't possibly fit them all in. And it's going to be complicated. Remember I said this whole roller coaster ride with Trump's going to be pretty complicated? Democrats are going to have a pretty complicated ride on picking a nominee for 2020. And you're going to hear from a lot of people who are going to want to get you to lock in and go for somebody, and I hope you do. I hope you find somebody that you love. In this big a field, you can back who you want to back. And, you know what I mean? There's not a punishment for it. You don't have to be pundits. There's plenty of us, trust me. You can actually pick the candidate that you like, get excited about him or her, and advance that candidacy. This is a great set of candidates. The people that are running is fantastic. Do you understand this? the most women ever running for president of the United States on a major party. The most people of color ever running for president of the United States on a major party. It's the most progressives ever running for president of the United States. I mean, this is kind of an amazing thing. You literally are stumbling over, and you will be, because at some point Arizona will be in its proper place on the schedule. You will be stumbling over candidates. Next year, I will not be speaking to you because you'll have 20 candidates for president. and you know, that's nothing to fear. It's not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing to have people stumbling over themselves running to run for president of the United States of America. Because the fact of the matter is, in a crowded field, there will be less negativity than there would be in a one-on-one race. I promise you. When it's that many candidates, if I attack her, you're not going to vote for either of us, right? I may reveal her dark secrets. But I've been such a jerk in doing it that you won't want me either, and so we'll vote for her. And so the reality is that these candidates understand that this will not be a negative race for the Democratic nomination. It will be a substantive race for the Democratic nomination. And these candidates will seek to appeal to you based on a set of issues, and frankly on their personality, on their ability to get elected president of the United States of America. That is, I mean, you know, have a Bud Light. You don't need anything else, right? Democrats, you should be very, very happy about this. And here's what I would argue is, here is your standard. And I'll just give you my ideas. You can, obviously, we'll take questions in a moment. You can tell me your other ideas. Here, to my mind, is your standard. What you ought to ask is not, you know, how much do you hate Donald Trump? And you shouldn't even ask, you know, how much do you hate Mike Pence? Because really, Mike Pence is pathetic. And you know, what you should ask is two questions. Number one, how quickly can you clean up the mess that Donald Trump has made? That is a competence test, and it is a seriousness test. And if they can't answer that, if you ask a candidate for president, that'd be the first question I would ask them in a debate. How quickly can you clean up this mess? Because if they can't answer that fast and smart and good, then that person should not be president of the United States. We cannot afford it. And then, second question, how quickly will you clean up the mess that made Donald Trump possible? Deeper, more fundamental question, right? A deeper, more fundamental question. We have a campaign finance crisis in this country. We have an electoral college crisis in this country. We have a gerrymandering crisis in this country. These are not soft things, these are crises. Donald Trump became president of the United States because a lot of things are falling apart and haven't been addressed, and our democratic processes were vulnerable. All he has done is reveal those vulnerabilities. So that second question, first question, how do you clean up the mess Trump made? Second question, how do you clean up the mess that made Trump possible? And that involves talking about how we make a better media in this country, talking about how we make a better political process in this country. And yes, I know it will be hard. I know. We might have to amend the Constitution a couple times. That's never ever happened before. We've never amended it except 27 times. Right? First 10 we did it all at once. And so, but maybe we're going to have to talk about that. We may have to talk about radical stuff. I was on a panel today at the book festival, and an expert on the Supreme Court, very moderate guy, not a radical guy in any way, said there's a growing argument that you should add two justices to the Supreme Court. That doesn't require a constitutional amendment. The court has had expansive and contracted membership since the founding of the country. It's been up to roughly 10, it's been down to 7. You know, that's the reality of the court. There's no rule. All that the Senate has to do, I know you're sitting there saying, I learned this too, that all the Senate has to do is say, no, we're going to add a member. Your president appoints, and you can add another member to the court. You can add 2 members.
Right.
And you like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying it's a great idea. There's some people that are going to hate it, right? And there's going to be people that are going to, and it might just tear the country apart. Who knows? But what I am telling you is that as your candidates come, as they come to talk to you, right? If they're not talking in big, deep, fundamental ways about how we address the challenges of this country, then as regards how we create our messes, then again, I might look elsewhere. And one final thing, this isn't my two core questions, but it's one final thing too, is we've been told we have 12 years in which to save the planet, right? 12 years to deal with climate change. And we have maybe 10 years to deal with an automation revolution that's really going to change everything about how we work and going to make, now many of you are a little bit older, maybe your children and your grandchildren, but it's going to be definitional changes as regards our workplaces, and that will then lead to definitional changes as regards our home life and, frankly, our society as a whole. These are big, fundamental things. And by the way, we really still haven't dealt with racism or sexism. So we've got some major, big ticket stuff, but the timeline, the urgency is real. And so the third question I ask is, how much sleep do you need? Because the next president of the United States is going to have to clean up Trump's mess. He's going to have to address what made Trump possible. These are fundamentals. And then is going to have to get down to the urgent work of addressing climate change and automation revolution, racism, sexism, inequality. It's going to be a great big task. I think it's pretty damn cool. I'm sorry, I'm speaking French there. But I think it's incredibly cool that you've got the better part of 20 people, multiracial, multi-ethnic, different genders, different backgrounds, all wanting to be president of the United States. I happen to think that if I was a Green Valley Democrat tonight, even though I know I'm going to have to get on a very scary roller coaster ride, I happen to think if I was a Green Valley Democrat tonight, I would feel pretty good. And I would feel like at the end of this 2 years, if I come back and talk to you 2 years from now, I think this country is going to be done with Donald Trump. I think this country isn't going to even remember the name of Mike Pence. I think this country is going to have a Democratic president and a Democratic vice president. I think it'll have a Democratic Senate. I think, and I don't say this casually, I say this as a pundit, I think that there's a very good chance that that Democratic president or vice president, one of them is going to be a woman. I think that there's a very good chance that one of them is going to be a person of color. I think that we are going to be beginning as a country to get serious about some fundamental repairs. And you folks who've gone through the long nights of despair, who've gone through all the difficulties of working for candidates, didn't always win, who've had frustrating times and difficult challenges, that you will be able to say, I kept watch for my country. I kept the flag flying through the difficult times, and we have arrived to the moment where we aren't talking about just fixing things that are broken. We are talking about moving forward into a society where racial and social and economic justice are realities, where we are saving our planet, and we are beginning to build foreign policies and structures that bring us to peace and not war. I think you've stood for that for a long time, and I believe that we will get there. Thank you.
So we'll take questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay.
Michael Cohen said that if Trump loses the 2020 election, he does not see a peaceful transition of power. What do you think?
I thought that's a pretty chilling statement, didn't you? Because this is a guy who actually knows him. This is a man who's his personal lawyer. Did you hear the question, everybody? This is his personal lawyer. Before that, an executive of the Trump Organization, and also a former deputy finance chair of the Republican National Committee. Like a guy who's actually been in the infrastructure of our politics, saying that he fears there wouldn't be a peaceful transition of power. I think that the best response we have to that is to get more comfortable with the idea of holding Trump to account, not less, right? Because a bully, and that's what he was saying, right? A bully with scary powers and the ability to perhaps draw people into supporting that. A bully doesn't respond to weakness. A bully responds to strength. And so, to my mind, it makes this year, this time, separate from the election process, all the more vital. The deconstructing of Donald Trump now, the full realization of who he is and what he is now, makes it less likely, A, that he runs for re-election. And I know people are like, you're like, oh, Trump will never stand down. With all due respect, I am in the Alec Baldwin school on this. And you're like about 3 weeks ago, Alec Baldwin is playing Trump, and he's like talking about something, and so he's like brings up some sort of thing. He says, and then my miserable hell of being president will be done. You know, the truth of the matter is that I think Donald Trump is a incredibly, so it's Trump calling now to say I'm better than that. Yeah, you know, he does that all the time. He's always texting, you know, and stuff. But no, the thing of it is, I think that Donald Trump is an incredibly narcissistic and self-serving, self-absorbed man. And I think there is a real possibility that he stands down if he thinks he's going to lose, and also that there is a real possibility that he takes a deal if he thinks it keeps him out of trouble. And I just think this is Donald Trump. I do not see him as a strong, evil mastermind. I didn't believe, and I don't think it's the meanest thing I've ever said to anybody, I don't think he's half the man that Dick Cheney is. And so, now that's a double, that comes around you from behind and bites you. But I'll stand on that. And so the answer to it is not to be frightened, right? And not to speculate, oh, Trump might do this, Trump might do that. It is to redouble our efforts to hold him to account at this point. I will tell you, the biggest fear I have is not about the transition of power, it is about the vulnerability of our election systems. I think our election systems in this country are incredibly vulnerable. I cannot believe that we have not, as a country, gone to verifiable paper ballots in every district in the country, universal. And Congressman Mark Pocan and a couple other members of Congress have a bill that would declare our election system a public utility, because our electrical utilities are protected by all sorts of federal programs that make sure that you can't mess with their computers and stuff, right? We just want to make sure that, you know, nobody's blowing up a power plant. Well, shouldn't we make sure that nobody blows up our elections? And so my second answer to your question is, I don't worry as much about like mid-November of 2020. I worry about mid-October of 2020. So I would redouble your efforts to get Democrats and Republicans to support security for our election system going into this race. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
So obviously you're talking about a major conspiracy against the President of the United States, this being the Democrats.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what's going to
or
happen?
the electorate.
The electorate. What's going to happen when we have a state of emergency and we declare that we all have to stand down from this? Is the Senate going to stand up then?
Yeah, very good question. This state of emergency thing, you know, we joke a little bit about the accountability stuff, and we talk about impeachment, which I think is a serious issue. I think Trump should be impeached for doing the state of emergency. I think it's a stunning abuse of his power. Not saying that casually. The fact of the matter is that taking your tax dollars to build a wall that is not needed and that will not work for the purposes he says, that the Congress of the United States said, we don't want to do this. The president being able to declare that is a kingly power. That is a monarchical choice. That is the choice of an elected despot, not a elected president of the United States. Now, there's people say, well, we've had 39 emergencies. Some of them are still on the books. Jimmy Carter said, you know, something about Iran, 40 years ago. True. And you know what? I think there are probably some emergencies along the way that shouldn't have been done. I'll even go so far as to say I think Barack Obama probably did some things that we shouldn't have let him do. I think there's plenty of people that did things we shouldn't have let him do. That doesn't justify letting this guy do this, because this is not comparable. There is no emergency. There is no crisis. He's taking our money and spending it for purposes for which it wasn't allocated. And I will tell you something. Get scared about that. Because, in my opinion, when George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, they had to do something with the wood, right? So they made a little box, right? You make a nice little box. When George Washington was president of the United States, he put the powers of the presidency in that little box and he handed it off to John Adams. John Adams put a few more powers in, Alien and Sedition Acts and all sorts of stuff like that. He hands it off to Jefferson. Jefferson, to his immense credit, took a couple powers out. Then his vice president shot the former Secretary of the Treasury, and they had to change some other things and put some more powers in. By the time he took James Madison and a little more. Well, now, they got rid of the box about 100 years ago. When you become president of the United States, they drive a semi-tractor trailer full of powers up to the White House, right? Our presidents are so imperial and so powerful, it's way out of control. We don't declare wars anymore. We don't check and balance our presidents. Trump is possible in part because we have let the presidency become so all-powerful. And if we let presidents of the United States, Democrats or Republicans, start to say, oh, I couldn't get what I wanted to spend tax money on, so I'm declaring an emergency to go spend that money. If we let that power stand and it goes on to the next president of the United States, then I'm going to tell you, at some point, President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to declare a climate emergency, which I'm going to be enthusiastic about, but my Republican friends are not going to like. And the fact of the matter is, truthfully, this is a very big deal. Now, when you get to the declaration of an emergency that cancels an election or something like that, I don't think he'll do it. I don't think he would. And if he did, I have to believe that the United States Senate at that point would stand up to him. And I know, I see my friend shaking her head, and I see this distrust, and I understand what you're saying. If I'm wrong, then we have to go to the streets that day, my friends.
Yeah.
That's not a debatable point. I believe in peaceful protests, not violent protests, and I know all the challenges of it. But the fact of the matter is, we didn't cancel an election in the Civil War in 1864. Abraham Lincoln was terrified. Abraham Lincoln was terrified he was going to get beaten for re-election. He said he made the worst mistake of his life. He replaced a good vice president with an awful, miserable, drunk Andrew Johnson who screwed up Reconstruction. And so his fear actually harmed us. Franklin Roosevelt, in 1944, in the midst of World War II, was dealing with a horrible circumstance. And we had hundreds of millions of voters who were out of place, they're overseas and stuff like that. They still held the election. I'm writing a history of the Democratic Party, looking at that 1944 election. One of the biggest issues of the 1944 election was how you were going to get all the Americans who were overseas to vote, how you could allow them to vote. You know, people are defending the country because they were so far afield. And it was really difficult. It would have been easy for Roosevelt to say, you know what? We're probably going to win this war this year, and then we have the election next year, right? Roosevelt didn't do that, didn't even ponder it. We have never, ever done it. We didn't do it in 1812 when the British were literally lobbing bombs at the White House. You know, and so I think I'm hoping that we can see it through without any problem. And in fact, I have to believe that that's the bridge too far. I hope I'm right. More questions?
Question back here.
First of all, thank you, John. I feel better.
Good. That is why I came here tonight. I said there's going to be a guy in the far corner.
And my question is, what do I need to tell my congressperson that is going to prompt her to get on the ball and start impeachment?
Okay, that's a very good question. Now, who's your congressperson? Who is it? Okay. That may be a little hard. No, look, here's what I will tell you. This is an important thing to understand. Keep your eye on the Republicans, not on the Democrats. Keep your eye on the Republicans. How many of you watched the whole Michael Cohen testimony? Oh my gosh, these are my people. Hey, you know, Like you got your Michael Cohen, T-shirts, and you got your Dakota rings, and it's like you sent away, you got it off the cereal box. You're all into this. I love you people. Now here's the thing. If you watch the whole Michael Cohen thing, number one, you saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ask some pretty damning and good questions, right? They're like, they keep saying this young woman from New York, she should just be quiet and stuff like that. Actually, every time she speaks up, it gets better. But the most interesting thing about the hearing was that late along the way, they got to Justin Amash, the Republican congressman from Southwest Michigan. And Justin Amash, not only reasonable, he actually asked some relatively damning questions. He went into some core issues. Now, he didn't do it the way that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did. He didn't do everything I might have wanted him to do. But there are a handful of Republicans. They are constitutional conservatives. And you want to watch them. You want to amplify them. Number one. So that's what you do. Learn about that so you can talk. You say even Republicans are starting to ask some tough questions here. And there are. Remember, you guys all love them now because they're on MSNBC, but look at how many former Republican strategists are on MSNBC now saying this is the most dangerous man in the world. Right? So you wanna gather that and amplify it. It helps to build backbone in people. And then the other thing is watch the way that Jerry Nadler does this. Watch the way that Jerry Nadler does this. What he will do, in my opinion, is he will slowly make the case and he will work very, very hard to build a consensus around some necessary acts. Remember, impeachment is not removal from office. The Senate has to do that. But the process of impeachment is to put the issues on the table and open up a debate. And it's fair to say to people, what you fear about that debate? What causes you to be cautious about that debate? Is there something you think is going to come out? Is there something you think is going to be revealed? So as you talk to your member of Congress, what you want to do is soften them up on this issue. You want to get them open up on it. And the incredible thing about it, what's amazing to me, is look at where the discussion is today as opposed to a week ago. Look at where the discussion is today as opposed to a month ago. Look at where it is today as opposed to a year ago. The fact of the matter is, I was on MSNBC this morning with Alex Witt, right? And our whole discussion was about impeachment. And it wasn't some, over-the-top, out-there thing. It was like, we've gotten to a point where if the President of the United States is guilty of obstruction of justice, then he has committed an act that Richard Nixon was in fact impeached for by the committee, not the whole of Congress. If he has conspired to violate campaign finance laws, the exact thing that Michael Cohen talked about, that's what Richard Nixon was impeached for by the committee in the second article of impeachment. And the interesting thing about it is, every one of those articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, Republicans voted for it. Not just Democrats, Republicans as well. And so, has our Republican Party become more, I think, sad and tragic? Yes, it's very sad, it's very tragic. But our job is to always demand that you got to speak to those better angels. And so, watch what the Republicans are doing. Watch how Jerry Nadler does it. Read a good book on impeachment. I wrote the introduction to a book called The Constitution Demands It. Makes a fine holiday gift. And learn it, get smart, go out, you'll be very convincing. Because you made me love you by saying that I've made you feel better. Okay, who else has got it?
We'll take another question on this side.
Yeah.
John, what do you think is the most likely path to retake the Senate?
Yes, right straight through Arizona. Now, you know that the fact of the matter is, retaking the Senate isn't all that hard. Truthfully, the weird thing is, 2018 was the worst imaginable year for Democrats in the U.S. It was just a nightmare scenario. You were coming off the 2012 election when Democrats had done really, really well. And so 2018, it was like you had nothing going for you. It was a very, very hard map. And yet, amazingly enough, and you had a couple of fallbacks, but you actually picked up a couple of seats, right? Where did you pick seats on? out in this wild Netherland of the West. Arizona and Nevada, right? Now, what I want to emphasize to you is that in 2020, you're going to be fighting Senate races coming off the 2014 election, which, by the way, was a Republican wave election. And so, as we talk about the path to retaking the U.S. Senate, there are many, many more viable seats in play. I do believe the Arizona seat, and I'm not saying this casually, I think it's generally, is like very high on the list. It's one of the top handful on the list. But I also tell you this, Democrats in 2020 should run their best possible candidate in every Senate race across the country. They should not pass on any. They should run Stacey Abrams in the state of Georgia for that U.S. Senate seat, because if it's ever going to be won, it could be won in 2020. If Beto O'Rourke doesn't run for president, he ought to run for that Senate seat from Texas. Yay! You got to get your very best candidates out there, your most dynamic candidates, and you got to fill every one of these races. When we talk, again, I started in Arizona, but there's a bunch of states across the country. Why I say this is because I'm not insincere in this. I believe the wheels are coming off Donald Trump's presidency. I think it is unraveling. I think that the Republican Party is in a state of crisis, and that crisis will get worse no matter what happens with Trump this year, because some of these people they will be as absurd as Jim Jordan was at the Michael Cohen here, and that will haunt them. And so I will only tell you that the route is to get your best candidates into every one of these races all across the country, and to understand the story, and I will tell it very quickly, of John Race. John Race was do you remember John Race? You're nodding over a couple of steps. John Race was a mechanic, a member of the Machinists Union in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And in 1964, he was on the county board in Fond du Lac County, and they said to John Race, we don't have a candidate for Congress in the 6th district because the Republicans are so popular here. It's such a powerful, great district, and we need a candidate. Will you run? And John Race says, well, I'm getting some overtime at the machine shop, and so I can't really campaign, but if it's just put my name on the ballot, yeah, I'm a good Democrat, I'll do it. And he put his name on the ballot, and on election night, because Lyndon Johnson swept to an amazing landslide, and Democrats did great all over the country, John Race was at the victory party for the Democrats, and he cheered when Johnson won and Humphrey became vice president. He cheered when Bill Proxmire got reelected to the U.S. Senate, and he was about to go home because he was on first shift the next morning, and somebody said, John, did you look at that total? Because you just got elected to the United States Congress because you took the slot. And John Race went to Washington, D.C., and he voted to create Medicare and Medicaid. He voted for the Voting Rights Act, and he voted to start the war on poverty. And he got beat in the next election, but damn, that was a good term.
All right, we'll take one more question, and that will be it. What's that?
I'll take a man and a woman, then we're out of here. All right, there you go.
In a little, perhaps smaller thing, but in the interest of being able to walk and chew gum at the same time, there are going to be a lot of issues.
By the way, can I interrupt you before you say, did you see this video there's an African-American, a woman who represents the Virgin Islands in Congress, and she was on the committee.
Oh, she's the one.
Yeah, she cut a video of her coming out of her office with a big wad of gum in her mouth, and then she said, basically, look at this, and started walking and chewing gum at the same time.
One of the things that our policy-making process has reflected for a long time that has got to change. We tend to treat symptoms rather than a disease. And that covers a long, a wide spectrum of issues. One that immediately comes to mind, the minimum wage. Just take that, okay? We're talking about $15 minimum wage, okay? Well, if we really wanted to set proper minimum wage, maybe it should be $17.50, okay? But then we re-enter the same cycle again, where that erodes, is eroded by inflation, and 15 years down the road, it's worthless. And then we do the same thing over again. When there is a cure available at the beginning, if we set it at $17.50, a proper minimum wage, and index it, then we don't have to revisit it. We cure the disease rather than treat the symptom.
I think that's a great question. Basically, treating symptoms rather than treating disease. And in fact, I would argue, and I'd be very tough on you here tonight, I'd argue that's been the crisis of the Democratic Party for the last number of years. And it has damaged the Democratic Party. Now, I'll give you one example of symptom and disease. When you lose the presidency in 2000, even though you won the popular vote, but the Electoral College takes away the presidency from you because the Supreme Court intervened, you might want to, the next time you have the presidency in both houses of Congress, address the Electoral College, because then you might have 16 years later, you win the presidency by 3 million votes, and you still lose it. And so, being a structuralist, being serious about structure matters. And what you're saying is exactly right on the minimum wage. It's right on a whole host of things. The American people, especially younger voters, they're like, why don't young people come to meetings, right? Well, young people, amazingly enough, will come to meetings if they think it's about a big, big deal. But they don't always come to meetings if it's about an incremental little thing. And so, for the Democrats, one of the things they have to figure out, a lot of people portray this as a left-right fight. Who's, you're going to be socialist, or you're going to be moderate, or whatever, stuff like that. I don't think that's what it is. I think what it is the Democratic Party a party of great, big ideas about solving problems that have remained unsolved for too long? And if the Democratic Party is that, you will win over voters not merely for one election, right? It won't be whipsawed back and forth. You can win them for a generation. You can win them for a long period of time. There is a reason why Democrats still default to Franklin Roosevelt. Yeah. It is because Franklin Roosevelt was the best president of the last 100 years. Yeah. He really was, because you're in the middle of a scorching depression, and it's awful, and your dad is selling apples to survive on the street, and Franklin Roosevelt comes in, gives your dad a job, gets the farm back, and brings rural electrification out to your house. And the fact is, that is not shooting around the edges. That's going to the heart of the matter. And there are people who voted for Franklin Roosevelt in rural Oklahoma, for the next 50 years, right? Even though there was another Democrat, it worked. And so, one of the things for the Democratic Party is to figure out what are the fundamental problems that need to be addressed and get serious about addressing them. That is why the Green New Deal is a big deal. And I am not here to tell you that the Green New Deal is easy, or that it will necessarily be popular. You have to work around it. You have to deal with these things. That is why taxing the rich is something that has a viability. The weird thing about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is that here she shows up, and everybody's like, whoa, she's scary, right? Or she's this, or she's that, right? And then they're like, oh, we just caught her. She said something crazy, that we should save the planet. And nobody's going to be for that. And then they poll it, and everybody's like, you know what? I think saving the planet's a pretty good idea. And then she says, well, maybe we have to have a 70% tax on the rich. She's not as radical as Eisenhower, but, she's kind of into taxing the rich. And everybody's like, oh my God, like hair's on fire. She's going to tax the rich. Oh, it's terrifying. Oh no, everything's going to fall apart. Then they poll on it, and people are like, only 70%? Can't we just take it all? And so the fact of the matter is that a cautious Democratic Party that doesn't go to the heart of the matter, indexing the minimum wage, dealing with fundamental issues, and don't limit yourself, right? We live in this incredibly wonderful, highly developed Western society, right? Like, why shouldn't the Democratic Party say, yeah, we're the party that's going to cure cancer in 10 years? No, I'm not kidding. Why not run on that? Why not say, yeah, that's research money and believing in science and going all in, because why should people still be dying of cancer? Right? It is, why shouldn't we be in favor of saying that health care is a right and no child is ever going to be lacking care because it costs too much money? You know, you get to the heart of the matter on these issues, and some of them will be hard. And I know you can't promise everything in every election, but I will tell you this, promise you this. If Bill Clinton, in 1993, instead of that healthcare plan that he did, which no one could understand, right? It was complicated and convoluted. It was heart in the right place, but boy, it was like 10,000 pages. If Bill Clinton had proposed single-payer, Medicare for all, healthcare is a right, no child will go without care, in 1993, he might well have gotten beaten. He might have lost that fight, right? But he lost for the big 1,100-page thing, right? If he had fought for something big and real, he might have lost that year, and then he would have run on it in 96, and he would have gotten reelected in 96, and he might have even lost on it again. But I promise you, we would have single-payer Medicare for all healthcare now in this country if Democrats had fought for it in 1993. It is as simple as that. And so, find an issue, not every issue. Don't make it, I'm not telling you to go off the deep end. Find some issues, fight for them, be willing to lose. Because the weird thing is, when Franklin Roosevelt did the New Deal, every single idea he implemented was an idea that Democrats and progressives and sometimes socialists had fought for before and lost on. But when the moment came, we loved it for it. And the fact of the matter is, I think we're in a moment where people really want big solutions. Big solutions to big problems. Thank you. Let's take...
John, I like you and so do a lot of other people in this room, and we really like the way you think. And I do not want you to get out of this room without giving us some clues about some of the Democratic candidates running for president that you think we ought to be really looking at seriously.
Okay, so you want to talk about the pure country of this thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll do it quickly because I know it's a long, dark night. And we all have to get home and get a good night's rest because you're going to want to be right there watching Jerry Nadler bring down those 60 subpoenas tomorrow morning. I know you're gonna have one of those like 60 bingo thing, yep, oh, there's obstruction of justice. Oh, Donald Trump Jr., got him. So I realize that tomorrow's gonna be a big day for you, so we'll do it a little bit quickly. Cory Booker is the best speaker of the bunch. Most capable public speaker of the bunch, most inspiring speaker of the bunch. You can get him for next year's dinner and go for it. He is really, really good at going in front of a crowd and inspiring them. He's also really, really smart because he has made himself the top expert among the candidates on farm issues. He's way out in front of breaking up agricultural monopolies and stuff like that. And you say to yourself, why would a guy from Newark be interested in farm issues? What about the Democratic race for the presidency involves farms? Where is the first caucus? And you go, Iowa, okay. So Cory Booker's gonna surprise people. He's gonna do better than people expect because people are gonna be wowed by what an effective communicator he is, and they're gonna be impressed by the ideas he has put in play. Number one. Number two, I know that there's people in this room who do not like Kirsten Gillibrand because she was mean to Al Franken. No, believe me, I've been to Minnesota. I have heard it, man. There are some blood oaths up there, man. Oh, jeez. And it's not pretty. But I will tell you this, Kirsten Gillibrand is tough. She is the toughest person running for president. By far, the toughest of the whole bunch. When James Mattis was nominated for Secretary of Defense, he got every vote in the Senate except for Kirsten Gillibrand. She voted no. She didn't do it to make some show. She did it because she said, that our Constitution establishes civilian control of the military. We shouldn't have generals rotating into leadership of the military. She stands on principle and she does things that really piss people off sometimes, but she's a very, very strong woman. And I can tell you this, if I'm wrong about Donald Trump and he ends up in that debate, and Kirsten Gillibrand is debating him, she will shred him. I mean, she will destroy him. And so, keep conscious of that. Elizabeth Warren is putting the best ideas out of any candidate running right now. She is literally running for president as who she is, and that is like this incredibly smart person who, give me a problem, I find a solution. If you watch what she's come up with on, for instance, guaranteed daycare. So you want to talk about an issue that gets young women excited? Boy, I tell you, like through the roof excited. What she's doing, so everybody's like, oh, why would you spend a week talking about daycare? Because daycare is a real issue that energizes people, and Elizabeth Warren is mounting a campaign based on a core set of ideas. She's doing a really good job of it, and it's worthy of watching. Kamala Harris is a remarkable combination of a lot of the things that we ultimately want in a president of the United States. She is the child of immigrants, and she has lived around the world. She is multiracial, multi-ethnic. She has been a prosecutor. Some people think she's been too tough a prosecutor at times, but she has a strength, and if you watched her during the Kavanaugh hearings, right? She is an incredibly effective thinker on her feet, and very strong in how she does stuff, and she seems to have tapped into something where she's getting a lot of people on her side. Amy Klobuchar should not eat salad with a fork. Or with a Coke. Yeah. And she's gotten a really rough rap of late. What I can tell you about Amy Klobuchar is this. My daughter and her daughter go to the same camp in upper Minnesota. And I've sat around campfires with Amy Klobuchar, and I've never seen her be mean. Now, I understand that she's getting a rap, but with all due respect, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to speak French, and some of you don't understand French, and I respect that, but basically the attacks on her have been bullshit. I mean, it's just stupid, okay? There are plenty of men who are lousy bosses who are great presidents. Lyndon Johnson gave us the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, and the war on poverty. He was an awful person, okay? So the fact of the matter is, get over it. Klobuchar is actually pretty impressive, and she's doing a decent job of it. Bernie Sanders. You know the truth about Bernie Sanders? Right now, if the election was today, he would win. He would win the race because young people remain as excited about Bernie Sanders. All evidence is they were. I don't know if anybody saw his announcement event yesterday. It was stunning. It was a huge crowd, and it was really young and really energetic. And the fact of the matter is that I traveled with him last fall, and he is full of energy. He may be heading toward 80, but I just drove down here with my mom, who's 87, and she just went through the whole book fest and handled everything and jumped up every step and ran every place she needed to run. And so with all due respect, don't do the age thing on me. Sanders is going to be very, very viable. He may or may not, I don't know how far he'll get, but there's a lot going on with him. Joe Biden. Joe Biden may decide to make this race. And if he does, he will start as a front runner, and he is very popular with a lot of people, but I really do think, I have my doubts about whether this is a race that he should run. I would say that bluntly, and I like him very much, but I have my doubts about whether this is a race he's running. Last person I'll talk about, I haven't begun to get through half of them. And then I'll tell you what I think, okay? And I'll be very honest with you, as honest as I can be. Pete Buttigieg, who none of you have ever heard of, is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. I don't know whether you're applauding South Bend or in fact Buttigieg, but he is, I've been following him, and he is quite amazing. He is super sharp, super strong, very young, Quite impressive. And so he's got lots of ideas and a real boldness. He's very, very good at explaining things in ways that are appealing to people. Frankly, he's not bad. There's a lot going on there, things to be paid attention to. The candidate who I don't know that he'll run, but the candidate I think who could well be the most viable contender for the presidency in 2020 is Sherrod Brown.
Yes.
I'm not here to endorse Sherrod or to pump him up. I'm just telling you that Sherrod Brown is a remarkable person, just an amazing person. And he is thinking of running. I honestly believe, I know it's a rare thing in American politics, I honestly believe he's trying to figure out whether he should run. Like he's literally going and meeting with people and he's not sure. But the one thing to understand is I used to work in Ohio. I covered him when he was Secretary of State of Ohio. And this is the kind of guy, right, you know, everybody talks about voting rights and getting people registered to vote. He convinced McDonald's to put the registration forms on the trays at McDonald's so that you could fill it out while you're having your Big Mac. And to this day in Ohio, there are in county voter registrar offices, there are like ketchup-stained voter registration forms. That's the kind of guy, he's a very quite remarkable guy. And I will tell you, I'll close off with a Sherrod Brown story. Again, I'm not here to push him. I really like Bernie. I've known him for a long time. I've got a lot of affection for him. I happen to be super impressed by, frankly, I'll go another way of saying I just think that a woman should be president, period. And so I'm very impressed by some of the women that are running, and but I'll tell you a Sherrod story just to complete. And that is, Sherrod Brown, I knew him when he was a congressman. He's very, very anti-war. He's one of the most anti-war people in Congress, for what it's worth. He's incredibly courageous, standing up against the Iraq War and things like that. He's got all sorts of nuances to him. He looks kind of a little bit schlumpy. The suit doesn't always look perfect. He's a Russian scholar from Yale. He's incredibly brilliant and all that stuff like this. But he is very in touch. He came up from this little town called Mansfield, Ohio, right? And he's really imbued of that sensibility and that culture. He believes in spending time with working people, sitting at the tables where they eat, being in their offices and in their workplaces and stuff like that. And Sherrod told me a story back from when he was campaigning for Al Gore in 2000. And he was at an auto plant in Lorain, Ohio, and he went around the table with all these guys. And he said, well, what do you think about Al Gore? The first guy goes, I'm not for Al Gore. I don't like him because he is in favor of abortion. He wants to kill babies. Go to the next guy. What do you think about Al Gore? So I don't like Al Gore because he's for the gays. He wants to give it all away to the gays. I don't like him. Go to the next guy. I don't like Al Gore because he's going to take away our guns. He's going to take our guns away from us. I'm not going to vote for Al Gore. And Sherrod leans back as their congressman, who's been incredibly militant on trade issues, on economic justice issues, on union issues all the years. He leans back. He says, well, you don't like Al Gore because he's for abortion rights. And you don't like Al Gore because he's for the gays. And you don't like Al Gore because he wants to take away the guns. Well, I'm for all those things. And to a man, everybody around the table looked at him like he was crazy. And they said, yeah, we know, but you're on our side. If you want to understand why Sherrod Brown is such an interesting person, this is a guy who has 100% record of supporting gay rights. A guy who has 100% record of supporting abortion rights. A guy who has stood up against war after war after war. A guy who has fought for women's rights, who has fought on all the issues, all of the progressive issues, and yet he can get a table of guys who are the swing voters that you're sometimes afraid of, who will say, but you're on our side. And the fact of the matter is, I don't necessarily think he's the only one that can do that, but I will tell you he is somebody I have seen do that, and it's pretty amazing. You are a wonderful group of people. Thanks for having me tonight. Thank you so much. I look forward to coming and seeing
John
you
Nichols,
again.
everybody. All right, let's stick around if you have any other questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.